So friends, hello. Breaking urgent broadcast. We are reporting live because right now there are explosions occurring all across Russia. In Tuapse. Yes, there are arrivals again in that same Tuapse, like this. Right over there. Just as you can very clearly see now. At this very moment, an oil depot is burning. The traditional Russians are in shock. They say I've lost my appetite.
Oh my goodness, wow. To be honest, somehow I don't really have much of an appetite anymore, either.
Also, various military facilities in the temporarily occupied Crimea came under a massive and coordinated drone attack during the overnight hours. And attention, possibly a Storm Shadow missile strike. Reports indicate a possible hit on the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet Air Force in Sevastopol. What a night. Meanwhile, Putin's approval rating in Russia is falling fast, and Kadyrov again embarrassed himself in public. Hello friends, this is the Priscilla Project. I'm Vladimir Timoshenko. Let's get started. So naturally, we'll begin our discussion right away with the primary main topic, the latest overnight strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation. To be specific, we're talking about Voronezh. Smoke is rising near the Baltimor military airfield in Voronezh after the attack. Early in the morning, air defense forces on duty detected and allegedly destroyed 2 high-speed targets in the sky over Voronezh. This was reported by the Ministry of Murders of the Russian Federation. According to preliminary information, there were no casualties, but buildings of a tire service and a utility cabin were hit by falling debris, wrote the local governor. As they say, yeah, right, like we'd believe that. But I want to tell you something else. According to open sources, the enemy's 47th Guards Bomber Aviation Regiment is stationed at the Baltimore airfield. And this airfield has been regularly used by the Russian Federation's forces to carry out airstrikes on Ukrainian territory since February 24th, 2022, that is, since the beginning of the Great War. Moreover, my friends, it was yet another incredibly hot night in southern Russia. During that very same night, the Krasnodar region was also heavily attacked by several UAVs. According to preliminary reports, the target may have been an oil depot in Tuapse. As they say, it hit again. Local residents heard a series of explosions. The air defense was working non-stop. And here's what they're saying in the so-called Tuapse operational headquarters. So, in Tuapse, UAV debris fell on the territory of the marine terminal. In the Tuapse municipal district, UAV debris fell on the territory of that very terminal, and there were no casualties from the falling drone fragments. A sudden fire broke out, which was then quickly and efficiently extinguished. More than 80 people and 25 pieces of equipment, including units from the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations, were involved in extinguishing the fire, according to the operational headquarters of Krasnodar Krai. They'll be putting it out for a long time. We know how things go in Tuapse. As that famous meme goes, we like how it burns, everyone running around and fussing. And this is just the beginning. Let me just remind you, this is already the 5th attack on the Tuapse oil refinery just this spring. By the way, friends, it's been a while since we've had any interesting videos. They say in Tuapse they've opened the fuel oil swimming season. Don't believe it? Then see for yourselves.
I put this sea in my mouth. What do you mean? How is this the sea? How?
Do you like the sea? It's awesome. White sand, right? That's what you said?
On my legs. Sit on your legs.
How are you going to wash yourself now?
Thinking how to do it.
Come on, go to the pool.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way at all without a pool here. And it was also extremely unpleasant and incredibly uncomfortable for the occupiers during the course of last night in temporarily occupied Crimea. Attention! Russian military bases came under a massive and combined attack by drones and missiles. It is reported that Storm Shadow missiles may have arrived. It is reported that those very Storm Shadow missiles sent a fiery greeting to the enemy. It was announced that about 20 drones were shot down, and that's only according to official Russian information. According to locals, the alert lasted since yesterday evening. At first, drones of various types were flying, and by morning, the good missiles had arrived as well. Preliminary reports indicate that in Sevastopol, a strike hit the headquarters building of the Russian Black Sea Fleet Air Force. And now, friends, amid all this, information is emerging that the war in Ukraine could end in just 6 months. Is this really the case? We will tell you more in our report, and then we'll return to this studio.
Zelensky has announced a timeline for ending the war's hot phase. Russia is trying to compensate for failures by striking the rear. A new anti-record for the occupation army at the front. More on this in the following report. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has revealed possible timelines for the end of the hot phase of the war. According to Olga Vasilevska-Smalyuk from the RD Servants of the People, the head of state shared this information during a meeting with the faction. According to her, the president noted that there is a possibility of ending the hot phase by November, provided that security guarantees are given.
Right now, we have advantages on the front that we can take advantage of. The main goal is not to give the Russian Federation the opportunity to deceive us and after a short pause, start new hostilities or a new offensive.
In addition, Volodymyr Zelensky told the MPs that he is waiting to see who in Europe will now act as the moderator of the peace process. Ukraine is also expecting a delegation from the United States in the near future. At the same time, in his evening address, Zelensky stated that Ukraine has stabilized the front. According to him, the positions of the Ukrainian military have become stronger.
It is thanks to the extraordinary courage of our brave people, combined with the use of drones, various advanced technologies, effective mid-range strikes, and our comprehensive long-range sanctions, that we have finally managed to successfully stabilize the front lines and secure our positions.
Meanwhile, the situation for the aggressor country on the front is deteriorating. This was stated by Michael Kaufman, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, in an interview with New York Magazine. According to him, the way the Russian army is waging the war is yielding fewer and fewer results.
The Russian leadership was betting on constant pressure along the entire front line. Not on large-scale breakthroughs, but on intensive small operations along a wide front, aiming to exhaust Ukrainian forces and possibly cause the front to collapse. But that did not happen. And now this seems even less likely, given the adaptation of the Ukrainian military.
In the analyst's opinion, Russia is trying to compensate for its failures at the front with strikes on the rear, and because of this it is ramping up the production of attack drones and increasing the use of ballistic missiles. At the same time, Kaufman notes that Ukraine is in a better position than before.
As a matter of fact, it is showing better results than many had initially anticipated. In the fall of 2024, the situation appeared to be quite difficult. But then the front stabilized. The Ukrainian political leadership has a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the actual situation on the ground. And that is exactly the reason why there is no willingness to agree to disadvantageous or burdensome ceasefire terms.
The analyst concluded that time is increasingly not on Russia's side. The Russians were counting either on the collapse of the Ukrainian front or on the breakdown of Western support for Ukraine. But neither of these scenarios came to pass. At the same time, the pace of Russian advances is rapidly decreasing. According to recent reports from the news agency, in May, Russia captured the smallest area on the front since March 2024. According to the Deep State project, from May 1st to May 24th, the Russian military has managed to seize only 35 square kilometers of sovereign Ukrainian territory. At the same time, the defense forces continue to regain control over Ukrainian territories. Military analysts currently believe that final conclusions about the overall scale of the systemic problems in the Russian army can be drawn by the end of June. If by that time the pace of the offensive does not increase significantly, it will be possible to conclude that the offensive capabilities of the Russian military have significantly and noticeably decreased.
So friends, here's another important point that I'd like to suggest. Leave your comments and questions right down here under this broadcast. We'll be communicating live on air. And by the way, let me immediately read, "Glory to Ukraine" from Talon, our subscribers write. In fact, that's already a huge greeting to Talon because frankly, the situation in Estonia right now is also very difficult. Rumors about an invasion of Estonia by the Russian Federation. Let's hope they remain just rumors, but in any case, we must be prepared for anything. So I want to say thank you very much to Talon and send a warm greeting to Estonia as a whole. More broadly speaking, regarding what is happening today and in recent days, let's call things by their proper names. The Ukrainian armed forces are now creating real hell for Russian military logistics. Take a look at this specific case yourself. So, monitoring channels are literally flooded with fresh videos of burned out trucks and fuel tankers scattered all along the roads in the enemy's rear. All of this is very telling. When you look closely at these intense shots, you realize just how incredibly tense and heated the situation is right now. On Russian territory, as they often say, the war is finally returning to the very place where it was born. that is to say directly onto the territory of the Russian Federation. Now, let us return to our colleagues in the studio. Friends, here's what I want to say. Today's attack on Russian Federation military facilities demonstrated only one thing. Once again, this situation has clearly demonstrated the profound difference between a free, sovereign, and independent Ukraine and the brutal actions of these documented war criminals. Friends, now I would like to take a moment to show you exactly what Russia is doing, for example, in the northern part of Ukraine's Chernihiv region. Let's take a look at this, friends. So these are the harsh realities farmers are dealing with today. A drone hit and exploded just a few meters away from the tractor driver. In the Chernihiv region, the relentless shelling of Ukrainian territories bordering Russia continues daily. You can see the rising flames and the thick smoke, yet brave Ukrainians are still trying to work through all of this chaos. They are trying to do everything they can so that their country can withstand this terrible war once again, the war that Putin started. And of course, the brave armed forces of Ukraine are diligently doing their job. Right now, let's talk in more detail about how Ukrainian drones, specifically Ukrainian-made drones, are effectively burning the occupiers' heavy military equipment. We have quite a lot of interesting things to tell you and show you about this today. This is exactly what our next exclusive report is about.
Ukrainian drones are destroying the occupiers' equipment on a massive scale, and the war is increasingly moving deeper into the territory of the aggressor country. For the first time, the carpet plan was announced in Russia's Kaliningrad. More on this in the following report. Ukrainian drones continue to maintain fire control over the enemy's key transport arteries, more than 150 kilometers deep behind the front lines. On the morning of May 26th, the Telegram channel Xelenova Plus published a new video showing the destruction of Russian military equipment. The exact location has not been disclosed. On the evening of May 25th, another strike on military logistics was also recorded. The video likely shows a road in the occupied town of Kartsysk, Donetsk region. Drones are increasingly successfully attacking Russian logistics in the temporarily occupied territories. Almost every day, new videos appear online showing the destruction of equipment. As is known, Ukrainian UAVs keep the Russians' land corridor to the temporarily occupied Crimea under fire control. Due to increasingly frequent attacks, Russia has even closed the route to the Crimean Peninsula for civilian vehicles. According to the publication Welt, the situation in the drone war is shifting in Ukraine's favor. According to the details in the article, Ukrainian forces were previously primarily concentrated on the task of creating a death zone 15 to 30 kilometers wide along the front line. However, now Ukraine's drone forces are actively working to extend this range up to 150 kilometers beyond the line of contact. The publication cites a recent statement by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who reported an increase in such attacks.
One of our priorities for the coming months is medium-range strikes. This year, we have already ordered 5 times more resources for such strikes than last year, and we will continue to expand the volume of orders and production.
Meanwhile, there are virtually no safe places left in Russia itself. In Russia's Kaliningrad, the cover plan was announced for the first time on the evening of May 25th. According to the Telegram channel Union at Krabrovo Airport, arrivals and departures of planes were halted and dozens of flights were circling in the sky, unable to land.
So, my dear friends, I continue to read your comments under this broadcast. Lyudmila Mironyuk has written to us, "This Russia Day reeks of corpses. This sense of joy comes with coffins in hand. This holiday, how incredibly distant it felt from us. For many, only a tiny flickering spark remains." Well, you see, our subscribers really do have the right sense of humor and a good way with words. So once again, I urge you to keep writing and sharing your thoughts. And of course, subscribe to Union. Stay informed on what's happening in Ukraine globally and how Putin's Russia descends into the abyss. Speaking of the Russian abyss, it's the 5th year of the big war, and these are the kinds of victories the Z-folk are celebrating. Just listen to what they are currently writing in their private Telegram channels. Over in the Dobropilya operational sector, our own forces, Russian troops pushed forward in the center of Rodinske and took control of a pig farm. Attention, friends, yes, a pig farm. South of the city, enemy channels are acknowledging this. Here you can see this screenshot. Pressure on the Ukrainian armed forces from the southern flank is increasing. Fighting continues to the west of Hryshin as well as in the areas of Novoalexandrivka and Vasilivka. But the main emphasis is that Russian troops have captured a pig farm. See what kind of army this is? Such are their victories. About the pig farm, let's get back to the studio. I can tell you this. It's very symbolic that the Russians are taking over a pig farm, considering what they did, for example, during the occupation of the Kyiv region. Just as the saying goes, they're taking their rightfully deserved position there. Yes. And now for a little lyrical digression. Let us take a moment to remember. Let's remember the Chechen disgrace by the name of Kadyrov. Let's take a little break from the military actions. He recently started promoting an energy drink called Don Don. This is happening while Putin isn't really supporting his candidacy in the upcoming so-called elections. Take a look at this mess. A segment without comments. The best house. A harmless house. He doesn't have an organism like a house. Insane, Kansen, and incredibly ungrateful. The best Don, harmless Don, Don for the organism, or something like that, mumbled Kadyrov, barely able to pronounce the words. That's how he advertised his son Adam's energy drink during a local competition in Chechnya. Let me remind you that the irony is that it was Kadyrov himself who back in 2013 completely banned energy drinks in Chechnya, claiming that they cause uncontrollable aggression and depression. He compared them to poisonous substances. You see, 13 years have passed, and how much his views have changed. Nothing better to do, right? Well, now let's talk about something truly important. You've probably already heard how the Russian army claims to be capturing pig farms, right? And they're very proud of it. But the reality is that the Russian army has started to retreat in two directions at once, the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk directions, for the first time in a long while. This was stated by Ivan Timochko, the head of the Council of Reservists of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And there's another extremely important aspect that needs to be discussed. In fact, China is opposed to strikes on Ukraine, particularly on Kyiv. You remember the background. Russia's Ministry of Killings issued an entire decree threatening terrible strikes and retribution against Kyiv's decision-making center. But what about the Celestial Empire? What about China? The spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Ning, commenting on Russia's threats to carry out systematic strikes on targets in Kyiv, called on the relevant parties to refrain from escalating hostilities. That was a quote. What's behind this convoluted wording? Let's watch our segment and draw some conclusions.
China has distanced itself from Moscow's threats to launch massive strikes on Kyiv. While the Kremlin is sending threats of new attacks through the United States, Beijing is calling for an end to the escalation, and Western diplomats are ignoring Russian blackmail. Why is Moscow ramping up the pressure right now, and what is hidden behind the Kremlin's new threats? This and more in the following report. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has commented on Moscow's threats to launch massive strikes on Kyiv. Beijing has called on both sides to refrain from further escalation. The official representative of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Mao Ning, stated that China's position on the so-called Ukrainian crisis remains unchanged. According to her, the only way to resolve the conflict remains through dialogue and negotiations. We
strongly urge the relevant parties to work together collaboratively to immediately bring a halt to the escalation and create conditions for the resumption of dialogue and negotiations.
When asked for clarification on whether China would yield to Russian blackmail and whether it plans to evacuate its embassy diplomats from Kyiv, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry neither confirmed nor denied. Earlier, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War stated that Russia threatened systematic strikes on Kyiv to demonstrate its strength after the humiliation associated with the three-day ceasefire from May 9th to 11th. Moscow is also attempting to portray pre-planned missile and drone strikes as a response to Ukraine. On May 25th, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, stated during a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that the Russian army is allegedly beginning systematic strikes on facilities in Kyiv supposedly used by the Ukrainian armed forces. Lavrov also specifically drew the American side's attention to a previously issued statement by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in which foreign states were strongly advised to evacuate diplomatic personnel and citizens from Kyiv. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that Lavrov asked him to convey a message from Russian leader Vladimir Putin to U.S. President Donald Trump, stating that Russia would strike Kyiv. Andriy Kovalenko, the current head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, has pointed out and emphasized that China is distancing itself from Russia's threats to strike Kyiv and from Moscow's aggressive rhetoric, which began immediately following Putin's visit to Beijing.
Interestingly, it seems that Russia very much wants the United States to ask Putin to refrain from strikes that have no military purpose and serve only as regular acts of civilian terror.
Alexander Kovalenko recently pointed out that Sergei Lavrov's public statements about trying to transmit signals through Marco Rubio appear to be a strategic Moscow attempt to convey a certain message to Donald Trump. According to Kovalenko, the reason for such activity may be related to the worsening situation of the Russian army at the front. After all, Ukraine's defense forces continue to maintain the initiative in several directions, striking at the logistics of the Russian occupiers, including in the south, and gradually complicating the supply of Russian troops. At the same time, attacks on targets deep within Russian territory are continuing. Chemical industry enterprises, oil infrastructure, and air defense systems are coming under attack. According to the expert, vulnerabilities are being detected even in the Moscow area. Kovalenko also emphasizes that Russian army losses remain so high that without a new partial mobilization, Moscow cannot count on any significant changes in the situation. However, Kovalenko believes that even mobilization would only be able to temporarily prolong the war without addressing the key problems of the Russian army.
Russia is now trying to force Ukraine into making concessions at the negotiating table through terror. But this is naive. It will not happen, although Putin apparently believes it will. Russia must immediately stop the war, and only then will it be able to avoid the consequences that Putin is not yet telling the Russian people about.
Analyst and Ukrainian soldier Kyrylo Sazonov says Moscow's attempt to intimidate everyone with new strikes on Kyiv, primarily foreign diplomats, failed.
He aimed to conquer the entire universe, threatened to use the massive Death Star, but ended up just being quite rude to an old lady on the tram. That was the general reaction, because Russia's threats are no longer really taken seriously anymore. It's considered good form not to take them seriously, but to just brush them off. Official representatives publicly treated these threats with clear disdain. You could even say they demonstratively showed their disregard and lack of respect for Russian threats.
Earlier, the EU ambassador to Kyiv, Katarina Maternova, stated that Western diplomats would not leave Kyiv despite threats from the Russian Federation about new strikes on the city.
There are further serious consequences from today's shelling of military installations and facilities on Russian territory. A direct strike hit the thermal power plant in Belgorod. And in Taganrog, following a missile attack, a formal regional state of emergency has now been declared. A boiler house was damaged. There have been powerful strikes on various military installations in Crimea, Tuapse, once again, very interesting. Apparently it's raining down oil again. Well, we'll talk about this in the next episodes of the Prizl Project. And by the way, Nebenzia, the one who is Russia's permanent representative to the UN, said that he doesn't like the war. I'll quote him, "I'm not saying that war is a good thing. I don't like it. One might think that Nebenzia has realized and understood everything. No, it's not that simple. The Russian world can't be cured. Then they just add more fuel to the fire. The difference is that we never intentionally attack civilians. Well, yes, of course. We Ukrainians know and understand that the way to fight the Russian Federation is exactly as the Ukrainian armed forces are doing today, with powerful strikes on military targets. And by the way, the Russian elite is becoming increasingly disillusioned with Vladimir Putin because of the failed war against Ukraine and the economic downturn in the country. How exactly is this happening? Let's take a look.
The approval rating of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is rapidly sinking. According to a sociological survey by the company USP, only 10.5% of Russians believe that Russia is moving in the right direction. Back in October of last year, this figure was over 36%. More than 73% of Russians believe that life in Russia has become dangerous under Putin. In addition, 84% of respondents are convinced that it is Putin who is responsible for the large-scale fires at Russian oil refineries. The surveyed residents of Russia are also dissatisfied with restricted internet access and blocked resources, the generally low quality of life, and the sense of devastation in the country, as well as the level of corruption within the military structures. Distrust toward the Kremlin regime is growing even among Z bloggers. For example, Z war correspondent Anatoly Radov complains on his Telegram channel that Putin is spending billions on strikes against Ukraine instead of meeting the needs of the occupation army at the front. He claims there is a catastrophic shortage of Mavics and FPVs, which in his opinion is why the Russian spring-summer offensive failed. As is known, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the aggressor country Russia continues massive attacks on civilian targets in Ukrainian cities. As a result of the massive strikes on Kyiv on the night of May 24th, 2 people were killed. 91 people were injured. According to a statement by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, about 300 sites in the capital were damaged, most of them residential buildings. In addition, Russia attacked cultural sites, such as the National Chernobyl Museum, where more than 40% of the exhibits were irretrievably lost due to the strike. The historic building of the International Center of Culture and Arts was also damaged. On the night of May 24th, Russia also struck Bila Tserkva with an Oreshnik ballistic missile, which, according to media reports and OSINT analysts, hit a garage cooperative. Analysts at Defense Express note that this strike, like previous ones, is more demonstrative and psychological in nature, serving as an attempt to pressure and intimidate Ukrainians.
Friends, this was the Pritzlin Project. Stay with us and subscribe to the Union YouTube channel. This was Volodymyr Timoshenko with you. We'll definitely see each other soon. Bye.